Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discovering Education, where we bring governance, leadership, and alignment to life. I am your host, Janice Thomas. I am so excited about tonight's show and the guests that we will be bringing forth. I just want to let you all know that this show is everything. It's what we need to help our community, to help our parents, help our students to better understand what's going on in our education system. And as the founder and CEO of this work, I just want to thank you all for joining us each week as we continue to bring on guests to help answer some of the questions, to help give us guidance on our show. So every conversation we have had so far on the show has led us here to the question of alignment. Do we truly believe in student success? And if we do, how do those actions prove it? Tonight's conversation, Aligned Acts of Improvement, looks at every belief, behavior, and how leadership alignment drives improvement at every level, from the boardroom to the classroom. Joining me on tonight is our national educational leader and former superintendent, Dr. Anthony Hamlet. He's known for his transformative leadership and focusing on aligning systems to serve student outcomes. Dr. Hamlet, thank you. Thank you for being here on tonight. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're also my partner in crime too, right? So let's get in this.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Dr. Hamlin, you have served education at every level.
I have. Yeah, I have.
Office, superintendent's office, and now as a national leader. When you reflect on your journey through the education system, what moments most shape your belief in the power of alignment and leadership?
I think the moments that resonate with me is when I see students out in the community, obviously students that I've worked with, but as I see students who have graduated and they see me and they talk about the impact that they had on their lives, and I think that's why I stayed in education. One of the reasons, people ask me oftentimes, why did you choose education? Sometimes a thing chooses you. I would say, and that's a story for another day, how I fell into education, because I will tell you that I told myself I never wanted to be a teacher, but I always wanted to work with kids. I found myself growing up that I wanted to be a counselor or behavior specialist. However, I actually did those things before I went into education. So my background has been experienced, varied, and wide, but always working with children and championing, being a champion for children across various systems, though. And just to get back to the specific answer to it, I think the way the impact that I've had on children over the course of my career, what I've done for them when they were in my charge, supporting them, making sure that they had a voice. Student voice is a big thing right now. And we were doing student voice, which I learned from my mentor and predecessor back in one of my schools on how to do that. We didn't call it student voice, but we had programs and supports in place and conversations with our students. And just that impact that I had on students. And when they see me out in the community and they thank me, have a good time, and say they had a great experience based on the environment that we provided for them.
Well, Dr. Hamlin, you have worked you have experience with some tough campuses, right? You worked at some turnaround campuses at one point. I mean, tell us about that.
Yeah, I would. So you can't tell. I'm a former football player, right? And so this is the stereotype thing, right? Big black guy, he got to be the enforcer. It was seen as that. Right. Folks would ask me all the time, although I did coach, but my first role was in the classroom as a AP, advanced placement sociology, and also psychology teacher as well, multicultural studies teacher, and American history as well. And so just being in that role and just being honest, being able to break through and get opportunities. Right, because they always have these stereotypes about he's a jock, because of the way I look, my background, what it was. So as they say, I had to work double time to make sure that I had my opportunities. There was even times I had to go out and get my own opportunity and pay for my own professional development to get myself ready. Because one thing I always talk about with in my speeches, and also when I'm talking to youth as well, you have to be ready when the opportunity comes, not getting ready when the opportunity comes, right? So you never know when the opportunity will be there. So continuously prepare yourself, because you never know when that somebody's gonna knock on your door or you have this opportunity. And then you got to be ready.
Froze?
You got to be ready for it. You said I froze?
Be ready for it.
What,
yeah, you had froze for a minute.
Okay, got it. But I mean, you get the gist, right?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to ask you a few questions tonight, and I definitely hope that it's in line with much of what you do right now today, and kind of lifting up your experiences too that you've had at every level, because the theme itself, Aligned Acts of Improvement, you know, it really resonates with me, starting from the boardroom down to the classroom. So the first thing I would like to ask you is, what does it mean for leaders to move from believing in students' success to demonstrating that belief through aligned actions?
I think oftentimes folks have the right intentions. And when you say that, it brings me back to something I said when I was superintendent of Pittsburgh Public Schools. And, you know, we put all this effort into creating a strategic plan, as most districts do, right? When we launched it, I was in front of the community, in front of the board, in front of students, faculty, and staff, having this conversation, introducing the strategic plan. And once I finished, I said, now the plan is in place. That's the easy work. Now the hard work begins. The hard work begins is when people actually have to change, right? You know me, I talk a lot about change. People scream they want change. They come up with these plans, these action items, school improvement plans, district improvement plans, but more than likely it's going to be resting on the shelf, right? So if you're not intentional, if you're not focused, if you're not living, if that's not a living document, then you're not going to get the intended outcomes that you're looking for, right? And so the people work is the work. Everybody screams for change, but when it's time to change, nobody wants to change, right?
Nobody wants to change.
It's coming upon all of us in the system. Why? Because all of us make up the systems. Each and every one of us individually make up the system. But guess what?
What?
You can only control yourself. You can't control anybody else.
That's true. That is true. So we have to try to find a way to work together, right?
You got to embrace the notion of change. You got to look in, see what you need to do to model your expectation to create a better future and outcomes for our kids.
Right. Thank you. You know, in student outcome focused governance, you know, our first step is clarity of purpose, understanding why the school system exists. But before we start talking about the data and policy or reform, it begins with people leading the work, right? So in your journey, you know, as a teacher, as a principal, superintendent, your view, it shaped your view of leadership today. And so one of the things in the conversation that you and I had was, and I love this because this is part of our governance work. When was a time when my choices, my behavior may have made the school system to succeed? So, you know, and I'm doing that aligned act, you know, that alignment starting at the campus level when you served as a principal, you know, and I think one of the things I heard was really powerful in that admission.
Yeah. So the question is, when was a time when my choices, my adult behaviors made it difficult for the system to improve? Is that right? And so as I self-reflect on that, one of the things in our trainings that we do, and one of the examples that I use as well, if needed to push to move the conversation forward, is that I can think back right now several times, unfortunately, but there's one particular time I talk about when I was a principal. And if you're a principal or you're an administrator, you know it's hard to move an underperforming teacher from your campus. That takes years of expert explicit documentation, the right way, the right steps, the right procedures. If not, the union will come back and get you. And so I felt at the time, going into a new school, a new campus, that I didn't want to spend my time, majority of my time, doing that. Instead, I said, oh, those kids would be okay, even though I knew they were with a bad teacher. Let me take that back, because I don't like to say bad. Let me take that back. They're with an underperforming teacher. So instead of me doing my due diligence and doing the documentation, I said, they'll be okay, and I'll eventually get this person to leave if I can't help them turn themselves around and become a better teacher.
All right. And now that you reflect on their behavior, you realize that that really harms students opposed to helping students.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that story. So when you think back in your early years in education, what experiences continue to influence how you coach and support leaders today?
I've had a lot of experience in education in various different schools as well. I mean, I started off in, you would say, the affluent area in, affluent high school in Palm Beach County. Then as I began, as kind of alluded to before, I began to move up the ranks, moving from teacher to dean of students to assistant principal. I moved to a different high school in a less affluent area. Then to get an opportunity, because I wasn't given an opportunity to become a principal like when I thought I should be. So I actually left the school district and went to a charter program. And the charter program was excelling so much that the superintendent at the time called me back in and said, hey, we want you to come back in, but not at a traditional school. They wanted me to come in and open a brand new alternative behavior program where all the supposedly bad kids would come from across the county. And so this was unprecedented because it was an opportunity to build a brand new alternative ed school. Typically, you know this, they put kids in alternative ed programs in the older schools that they're not using anymore, right? But this was a paradigm shift. They said, you know what, we're going to build this brand new school, and it's going to put all the latest and greatest technology in their equipment, and then bring those students there. And so just follow me now. And so alternative ed school, all the worst of the worst. You're talking about drive-by shooters, you're talking about gang bangers, but also from this one particular school, you had some students coming to my program, and the school was called Turning Points, which I named it. That I said these kids didn't belong. And so in my efforts at the alternative school, because you don't get the same type of training as a leader, I had to train myself, right? I had to go down to safe schools and do certain things and go through certain processes to become an instructional leader, so I can lead my own staff in these instructional conversations so we can improve student outcomes. And so I did all that. So to answer your question is that as a leader, I see where other leaders don't do the same thing, or I should say, I'm trying to find the right word to say, don't provide the same opportunities or grace to our students that I would, right?
Okay.
That's why when I became a high school principal, at the time, the worst high school in Palm Beach County, turned it around in less than 3 years. Other schools were sending their supposedly bad kids to my school. Of course, I got bothered by it, but I accepted the kids because I knew they weren't going to treat the kids the same way I would, give the kids the same kind of grace that I would, so they can thrive and survive, but also deal with some of the things they had to deal with and deal with it in a different way, right? Classic example. If you I'm 6'4", right now, 275 pounds, right? Big guy. And so if the kids come cursing at me, I'm going to approach it differently than a little white lady. She may be 5'2", 5'3", 5'4". Little white lady going to approach it differently. She's going to be intimidated. I'm not. We're going to have a conversation in the office. I'm going to get you right. And I'm going to say, go back to class.
Right.
You're going to be suspended now because you disrespected me. You cursed me out, blah, blah, blah. Right. So just, understanding and trying to understand the needs of kids and understanding that the needs of kids are diverse and we need to treat them in certain ways equitable ways so we understand their plight, but also providing empathy, not sympathy. There's a difference between the two.
Right. I really appreciate you sharing that story, and even using the scenario that you mentioned about, your approach opposed to someone else that will feel more intimidated, and the kids probably won't even show fear toward, especially when you're working with our most disciplined kids that have high needs as it relates to discipline. And so, but when leaders lose that sight of why school system actually exists to improve student outcomes, what happens when they lose that sight? Like, we're only here to, improve it, and not to improve student outcomes, but why we actually exist. What happens?
Well, I think we need to have more of the conversation with all of our staff, not just some. I know the work we do as governance coaches, we start with the board, but these conversations around mindset need to happen with your staff, central office staff, principals, teachers on a regular basis, right? Getting back to our why, yes, and a lot of people see this as their job, it's their career, but ultimately, why do we exist? We exist in this space to improve outcomes for kids, period.
Right.
So,
right.
So why is preponderance of our decision making around adult needs and what adults want, instead of what's in the best interest for kids? Even though it might be a little bit more difficult for adults, but it's in the best interest of kids. That's not the type of conversation that we're having nationally. That's because I can guarantee you that. The majority of it is about adults and what adult needs are. Now, understand me when I say that, right? In my approach, and what I say is this: my focus will always first be on the children, but understanding where I am, focus on the children by way of making sure the adults get what they need in the system to thrive and be positive and have the tools and skill sets they need to make it happen in that classroom every day. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's on point. Because adults cannot do the work to help improve student outcome and focus on the children if they don't have the supports that they need. That's good. But in effective school board governance, it teaches us that governance defines the direction we're going in. The framework calls for boards to focus on the vision, the values, and accountability rather than reacting to short-term pressures. Across the nation, districts are learning that alignment between the board, the superintendent, and the staff is not optional, it's essential. Why is effective governance the foundation? And I do see that as the foundation for lasting improvement in our school system.
Listen, that's the what do I want to say with that? That's the uncharted territory, right? And I say it is the school board makes the decisions, not the superintendent. You got governance, you got administration. The superintendent recommends based on their position as the expert in the organization, the CEO of the organization. They recommend to the board. The board either can say yes or no. The superintendent has very little autonomy when it comes to big stakes, high stakes decisions. I'll give you an example. And different states have this rules or limits are different. I think in Texas, the limit for a superintendent to do administrative action to purchase something is like $75,000 or $100,000. I think. Example, in Pennsylvania, the limit is $500. Anything over $500, I had to go get permission from the school board. So ultimately, the school board makes a decision. Of course, the majority of the time, they're going to say that because if I presented the plan and what I'm doing is being linked to our outcomes, our strategic plan, what we need to do. But I'm saying that to say this: the school board makes the decisions, and I don't think ultimately that's clear in the minds of the community, a lot of the community, right? And so if we don't bring the school board along, get them some training, get them some focus, get them some support, they're not going to make the right decisions. They're going to continue to make adult-centered decisions because of lack of. Then now, if you go into the majority of the school districts, you will not see SMART goals. You will see a plethora of you will see some superintendents say, yes, we just did our strategic plan. We have 41 goals. Nothing getting done. Research tells us 3 to 5 is a sweet spot. More than 5 goals, nothing getting done.
Nothing get done.
And so how do we really focus on getting granular about, yes, we have a lot of things to do. We can't do everything at one time. We have to prioritize. What's the priority? Right. If you're going out to your community as a board member, when is the last time you went out to the community and have a conversation? Majority of board members go out to the community when it's time for re-election or when it's time to vote or when they're campaigning, right? Instead of going out and being a person who educates the community on a regular basis. And I'm not saying like every week, right? Have a cadence of once a month, maybe once every 2 months, having these regular conversations and updating the community on what's going on in the school district, on why we do the things that we do, but also bringing them new ideas, but also eliciting ideas from them and their concerns about what's going on in the community and how the school system is impacting them. All right.
Yeah, I got it. So that really speaks to the alignment and understanding what the superintendent role is and the board role and why it's so important for our boards to actually have this training. I know in Texas, we have really laid out, a law that actually requires the school board to actually have this professional training. And when they align their training with what the superintendent is doing and actually going out and talking to the community about those changes and getting their ideas and making sure the community actually understand, what's happening in the schools that's there. So let me ask you, in your work with boards nationwide now, what behaviors distinguish those that govern for student outcome from those that simply manage for compliance purposes?
First of all, having board goals that matter, right? Majority of school districts you go into, absent Texas, because Texas have some parameters in place that I applaud. Not perfect, but it's way ahead of other other states and what they're doing, right? They're required to have SMART goals, right? Majority of other states don't have these type of requirements, which is problematic in and of itself. And so when you go to some of these school districts, they don't have SMART goals. They don't understand the vision and values, and whose job is that? It's the job of the school board to go out and collect the vision and values of the community. Once you collect the vision and values, you come back and work with the superintendent and the executive staff and the community based on the community input. You come back and create a set of goals that you're going to march toward for the next 5 years. And then the superintendent in line creates interim goals that are yearly goals that marches the system to the goal, the 5-year goal, right? You don't see that. You will see more than likely you're going to see a set of adult-centered inputs in a strategic plan because they don't understand the difference between inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and what or who owns the three. And we know in our work, the board owns the outcomes. That's why they set the goals. The superintendent and administration, they own the inputs and the outputs. And that's the administrative work. The majority of the things that you see in strategic plans they look good, but are they working across the system?
Now they look good, but are they working?
Now they work across the system. And that's another conversation as well. There's a lack of program evaluation. You have a lot of programs that are going on right now, and they're still in place just because folks are friends with their friends or higher ups. Not that their programs are working well, because they don't have programs evaluations. And so that's a whole nother conversation for another day and how that looks and what should go in for that.
Right. That's definitely is. That's a big conversation, especially when you talk about the programs and in schools that are under enrolled and all of that. So how does the clarity at the governance level influence confidence and consistency in classroom? How does that influence there? Because we say from the boardroom to the classroom, how does that influence that?
Wouldn't it be powerful if the board was relentlessly focused on improving student outcomes by laying out a set of 3 to 5, no more than 5 goals that are focused, so everybody understands what the priorities are at this time? Because typically, if you go into a school district, you got 5 different goals, right? Board might have some goals that rest and lay in the procedural manual that nobody pays attention to. Then you got strategic plan goals. Then you got the superintendent evaluation goals. Then you got each set of school improvement goals. And so when you look at that, how are we aligned and focused on improving student achievement in ways we need to, from the boardroom to the classroom?
Okay.
Right? We have to have that through line of something very clear that tells everyone and sends a signal that this board is focused on improving student achievement because it has set goals, and it also monitors those goals on a regular basis and what that looks like, and holds the superintendent accountable to making sure that they march toward those goals for the next 5 years.
When, like here in Houston, where I'm at, what does, I'm asking you this question about, what does that transformation look like, especially when look like?
Janice, you broke up. You got to repeat that. We kind of breaking up on my side.
Did you hear my question?
No, repeat it. You broke up.
I was just saying that in Houston, we have a lot going on. We have many challenges out here right now. And so when you talk about that transformation in leadership, the way we actually govern at the board level, what does that look like, especially when, the school system, the system itself is under so.
The last part of your question, I could not hear, Janice. I'm sorry.
Okay. What does the system, what does that look like, right? The transformation of leadership, what does that look like, especially when there's so much pressure to improve?
It looks like the board deciding that we want to do something different instead of maintaining the status quo. It goes back to what Einstein says, right? Mm-hmm. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. He asked the question, board, what are you doing differently to get different results? They're doing the same. Right. They put all the onus on the superintendent administration.
Right. Okay.
And they bring them a set of bring them something that's not student outcomes focused. It's adult focused, adult inputs, adult outputs focused instead of being student outcomes focused. Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me ask you this, and I think we have problems with our connection because of maybe the weather out here, I guess. So when you're talking about student outcomes, for the purpose of our listeners, what are we talking about when we say student outcomes?
Student outcomes is a measure of what students should know and be able to do. Okay. Being proficient in the standards. You have state standards across all grade levels in all content areas. You have standards, a set of state standards. Being proficient, what students should know and be able to do, becoming proficient in those state standards. Gotcha.
Okay. I just want to make sure our listener is able to follow the conversation because we use that a lot. We hear it, and so I think it's important.
That's what we should. I said that's what we should be measuring and how we should be measuring. What students
know. Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. But how can leaders foster that culture of like that self-reflection, looking at themselves and holding themselves accountable without creating that without being fearful or feeling fatigued, like they're not, making the efforts, the success that we're looking for? How can they do that?
You got to be accountable to the work, right? And I'm just being honest. The majority of superintendents, they have a lack of student performance goals in their evaluations.
Wow.
You follow me?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so if you want something to change, the onus can't be just on your principals. The onus can't be just on your teachers, because at least 50% of their evaluations are on student performance by and large.
Okay.
Be powerful if your superintendent says, I'm going to make sure that I have student outcomes metrics or student performance metrics baked into my evaluation. That way, you know very clearly that I want the best for you, right? Give me an example. When I got to Pittsburgh, I actually had to force my board to put student outcomes metrics. I worked with the Council of Great City Schools, and the great Mike Cashley at the time, he did all my board retreats the entire time I was in Pittsburgh. So I had a advantage with that, working with that great mind. So I appreciate him for that. And he would do all my retreats, and we got them to a place where 60% of my evaluation was student performance. 60%. And so when I came out to speak, it was very clear what I was
60%.
about. 60%. It was very clear what I was about. Right. Then I said, because I brought some new skill sets, some new ideas, some new continuous improvement models to Pittsburgh, and people were getting kind of shell shocked and said, hey, I'm going to give you time to learn this and absorb it over time. But once we absorb this, then you're going to be accountable. There's a learning phase that's involved in this process. Something different, right? There's a learning phase. And so we had a learning phase, and over time they grew. And then actually what happened is this. And so their evaluations were, I think, 40 or 50% student outcome goals. But also, get this, don't forget about your central office, right? When it comes to their work and how it's connected to improving student outcomes. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between the central office and the schools. If you go into the majority of districts and have a conversation, schools will tell you that they exist to support central office instead of central office being there to support schools. Changing that mindset, but also making sure that part of at least 10%, by the time I left Pittsburgh, at least 10% of the central office staff evaluations, I'm talking about secretaries, I'm talking about specialists, at least 10% of their evaluation was the district average of student outcomes. You follow me? Right. So that way, everyone had a stake in improving student outcomes, not just the schools. So okay. A system where everybody's accountable to students. Our jobs in a school system, you may be, and I talked about this a lot, you may be 5 layers removed from that classroom, but your job exists to support somebody, a teacher, a principal, a custodian that's in front of those kids on a regular basis every day. Your job exists because of students, right?
Right,
so
right.
Have a line. Yes, you're at central office. You're not in schools every day, but you exist and you're here to improve student outcomes.
Right. You know, we got, and I think a lot of people, we're getting a lot of prompts coming up right now. And one of the questions that I see, I mean, like one lady has stated, it's very insightful. We need accountability, and we do need accountability at every level, from the board, to the superintendent, his team, all the way to the classroom, the campus to the classroom. And we need to identify where those gaps are and make sure that everybody is accountable for the improvement of student outcomes. There's a question: how do parents and stakeholders encourage essential office workers? Or is that our responsibility as well to donate and help with community building?
I think it's a collective effort. I think it's it's everybody's business to make that happen for our kids. Our students are the future. That's cliche, but it's true. And so we need to make sure we support them as much as possible. We're working together collectively to improve outcomes for our students. And if we improve outcomes for our students, ultimately we improve outcomes for the community as well. So all this is connected.
Right. And then there's one other question: what does true accountability look like in leadership?
Oh, wow. If we're talking student performance, it's about making sure you're accountable to improving the outcomes of students every day, not just sometime, all the time. And yes, we talk a lot about improving student performance, but also making sure that you have a robust that's positive and supportive for students as well. And then they have a great experience when they come to school and they want to come to school. Also putting systems in place that run a highly efficient, highly fun-filled day for kids, but having systems and protocols in place that don't set kids up for failure.
Wow. Okay.
Creating that
Protocol.
robust culture, creating a robust culture that's focused on improving student outcomes with systems that drive improvement in student outcomes will lead to improved instruction in the classroom.
Okay.
Right?
I like that.
You heard that right. So what's my company name? CSI, Culture, Systems, and Instruction. Those are the big pillars that I've thrived on throughout my entire career. I've done some of the same concepts from when I was a principal on up through the superintendency. Tremendous outcomes for kids. Improved academics, drastically reduced suspensions at every level. But you got to work the concept. So you actually going back to this, you got to be accountable to the work. You got to hold yourself accountable. When you set measures, you got to push to get it.
When you set measures, you got to push to get it. Okay.
I like to say, and I didn't make this up. I've gained these kind of sayings over time. Is that you have to provide ample amounts of pressure and support. You got to pressure the system to get better, but you got to provide the right support to them to get better as well.
Okay, I got you. Let's switch gears a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about attendance and enrollment and the opportunity gap. And I know nationwide, across the country, districts are facing shifts. They got many shifts in their enrollment, attendance, and engagement. And we know that these are not just like data points. These are signals about belonging, trust, and connection. And outcome-focused governance challenges us to ask, are we measuring what truly matters? How do we know what we're measuring? And so from a national perspective, how are school systems responding to declining attendance and enrollment that directly affects student outcomes?
Janice, that's a huge question. I don't know how every district responds to that, but I face that, and I'm going to tell you from my experience, I faced those questions going into Pittsburgh, right? You got to dig into the data and find out what's going on. There was a narrative in Pittsburgh when I got there that the Pittsburgh city schools was losing students to charter schools every year. But guess what? As I dug into the data with me and my team, and also a third party working with the Council of Great City Schools also, we uncovered the true data, right? The true data was that there was a lack of births dwindling over time. So you had less of a pool of a population of kids to pull from. That's why we were kids, not necessarily that they were going to charter schools, because charter schools still had 25% of the share from when charter schools opened to the time I got there. So that narrative was false. Right? Okay. So you have to dig into the data and find out your own context and then tell your story. Right? Another thing I used to say as well, you're losing kids at charter schools. What do you think about charter schools? I'm very clear with them. And my board was, as I think most boards are, adverse to charter schools because they think they lose kids. I said this. Those are our kids, if they're in charter school or not. They're still our kids. Because guess what? Charter schools only go, in Pittsburgh that is, only go from kindergarten to 8th grade. And then 80% of those kids, where do they come? Pittsburgh public schools. So if we're not supporting folks that support kids, we're hurting ourselves. We're hurting our own kids, right? And I was very clear with that. I don't have a problem with charter schools. I have a problem with charter schools not being on the same level playing field when it comes to legislative rules and agendas. Yes, that's different, especially when, and I don't know if a lot of folks know this, Charter schools you can have up to, and it's different in every state, you can have up to 50 to 60% uncertified teachers in your school teaching your kids without a teaching certificate, right? And so that hurts kids over time. You have somebody who's not a professional, but also some of these people may be great. But I look at these things ultimately and say, this is about kids. How do we help folks who are helping our kids in our city, period? I don't have a problem with charter schools. Ultimately, if we fix Pittsburgh public schools, we won't have to worry about charter schools. So our focus is on making sure that we improve continuously in Pittsburgh public schools, and then it will take care of itself.
You know, you really said a lot right there, and I really appreciate that. I guess I'm under the same mindset as you. When we talk about, you know, kids leaving, we do have to dig deeper into the data and find out the why to that. And it's not that they leaving, you know, just to go to a charter school or another way of being schooled. Like here in Texas, we charter schools goes up to 12th grade. And so once they leave out, if they leave public education, they may continue throughout in the charter schools. But one of the things that I definitely agree with, it doesn't matter where our children are, that we need to support those systems because it is about them. And I believe that's what we really should be mindful of as a community, you know, nationally, that it's about improving the outcome of these children, making sure that those that are in the position to teach them have the supports that they need all the way around.
Yeah, ultimately, because, you know, when you look at the trend data, you have kids that are going in and out of charter schools from traditional public to charter schools on a regular basis. So you got kids that are in charter school this week that may be in your public school next week, right? And so, I mean, my board, you know, once I explained to my board and the community what was going on, I even end up having, you know, I think on a quarterly basis, we had trainings, PPS trainings, Pittsburgh Public School trainings for our charter schools in our city as well, joint trainings together. Because this, for me, it's about the kids, right?
Right. It's definitely about the kids. You know, what leadership behavior or practices have proven effective in re-engaging students and families after disruption or disconnection?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, how do they re-engage? What leadership behaviors or practices have proven effective in re-engaging our students and families after disruption or disconnection?
I think number one, being welcoming, being open, being honest, being empathetic to their plight and understanding what's going on with them, providing support and getting the support they need, not just for the students, but finding supports for the parents as well. Because ultimately, we only have these kids 7-8 hours a day, sometimes a little longer if you have school programs, etc. But ultimately, then they go back into the same environment. So making sure that we try to understand what's going on with the whole child and the whole family, so we can support as best we can, find resources that can support not just the child, but the student, the family as well, to make sure that we kind of have this wraparound services for the child, and also as by proxy, as an extension, the family as well, and then the community also.
Okay, I like that. I know that, like, when we talk about the disruption and disconnection, we just have a lot going on out here in Houston. At the same time, school is, you know, education continues. We have to send our kids to school. These teachers, our teachers need support. Our students and family need support. And so just trying to find those ways, things that we can do as communities, whether we're a nonprofit organization, a business that want to be involved and, you know, connect with our schools to help support our students is so important. There is someone just asked, how can the public, that's the one. How can the public work with us? We can share that information at the end. I am a nonprofit. I am local here in Houston. And so we can share more about that on how you can work with us at the end. The other thing I have like that, how can boards and superintendents just align their goals and resources to protect programs to sustain learning and student well-being? And let me tell you why I asked this question. I asked this question because we know that in small campuses, for example, right?
Yeah.
There was a question that came up about like why certain programs are not at a school. And from what I understand, that it really depends on the number of students that's actually that's on that campus that can enroll in that program, and also if we have a teacher that actually certified, qualified to teach that program. Can you speak a little bit about that?
That's an ongoing problem. Again, I face situations like this in Pittsburgh, right? Just quick story. Going to Pittsburgh, like 15 years before I got there, 20 years before I got there, they were about 60,000 students, right? And so they went through what they call right sizing, because they were, they didn't have as many students. Families were moving out because of the displacement of steel mills and things of that nature. So they were downsizing, and so they had to go through right sizing. And so the community, especially the Black community, was in shell shock because a lot of their traditional great high schools and elementary schools were shut down in their communities. And so they were very adverse to having a conversation about school closing. But when you have a school, as an example, that is has a capacity for 500 kids, but you got 90 kids in there, that's a problem. That's a problem. And so the problem you're bringing up is called under-enrollment, right? There's a capacity. Every school is built with a capacity for a certain amount of students. A lot of our schools are not at capacity. Some may be a little over capacity, but by and large, the majority are not at capacity, especially during these days in the advent of charter schools. And so what happens is that you have this community reaction when you begin to have conversations about closing schools.
That's the hard conversation.
Those are hard, even though you can show them. This is like anything. You can show them the data, and they still won't believe it, or they still not vote for it to move forward. Right? I told my even in my interview, that based on the deficit spending that they were doing, they would be broke within 5 years. Yes, that trend started. That's why I had to come up with a plan to actually close some of these schools. Of course, the board kicked the can down the road because they didn't want to make the hard decisions, right? And ultimately, people have emotional attachments to these schools. But is that in the best interest of improving student outcomes, or is that an adult input or outcome? It's based on adult needs, right? And to your point, you're saying, getting back to your point, if you consolidate, you can have more resources, heightened resources in a school. If you have 90 kids in a school that's supposed to be 500 students, you have 90 students, you're not going to have as much resources at all, because there's a standard allocation system for our schools, for all schools. You have some type of allocation system that allocates your resources, meaning your personnel, which is the majority of allocation formula it's about your personnel in your building.
It's about your personnel.
Yeah. The majority of the money is spent in a school district is on personnel.
Okay, gotcha. With the challenges that we have out here, especially with our schools, and knowing, just learning, I pay attention to a lot of stuff that, superintendents have said, whether they are in our largest school system, which is HISD, or other school systems, school districts. They're serving schools that are doing well, achieving really well, and then they're serving those that are underperforming, and those are the intervention schools. And so trying to find that balance and serving those students and making sure that the students that's really struggling, and that's why we had a conversation last week. I had one with Dr. James Hopper, where we talked about the opportunity gaps that lives in our schools. So you have two systems, and then you also have those gaps that lives inside of systems of schools that are doing well. What does that look like?
You know what I call that? I call it internal segregation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Segregation.
Tell me more.
Right. So you're talking about programs, services, and supports in a somewhat school that's rated B, C, B, or A, right? You think things are going well, but you have a portion of kids who are not being served, who need additional supports. But the school is not going to get additional support because they're a B or an A, even though they still have a pocket of kids that are underperforming that need additional support.
Okay.
Right? And so that's that opportunity gap that Hopper is talking about. There's a space that I liken this to the idea of special education. Give you an idea when I say that. It's about the way they allocate resources and funding based on the student's exceptionality. Right? But all students are not special ed. And so what about the students who are regular ed students who have some issues and exceptionalities for themselves? There's nothing for them. And so if you don't intentionally create a system that recognizes that in certain areas, crime-ridden areas that kids got to go to school, they're dealing with a set of issues that other kids in the suburbs do not.
Right.
And they need more support allocated to their school as a result. You follow me? And so if you don't actually come up with these parameters or these indicators that say these kids need additional support because they're in this crime rate community, they have high poverty rates, etc., then you're going to continue on the same regular system that you're on right now, allocating the same way. But also we need to realize, and we put this system, this was one of a big part of my first strategic plan in Pittsburgh, creating a equitable allocation system for schools. That way, some of those schools you're talking about who need additional support, they got that support based on these indicators that we put in place.
Okay. So when we talk about leadership alignment, making it strong, when it's strong, what changes do you see could happen in instructions, teacher morale, or even student engagement, if this alignment was strong?
Okay, do me a favor, repeat the conversation, broke up a little bit.
Yeah, we keep breaking up. When leadership alignment is strong, what changes do you see in instruction, like the teacher morale and student engagement? What changes do you see when we have a strong alignment?
Oh, we have strong alignment. You have focus, you have clear clarity and purpose across the entire system. You go to get a majority of systems now, folks saying, they don't know who's making decisions, they don't know their priorities, what's the district priorities. But when you have a clear focus, you have clear goals that are the district goals that are set by the board, then you have entire system clarity moving in that direction. But also adding the layer of, and the board is monitoring those goals as well, not just putting them in place, but monitor them on a regular basis by the goal monitoring report that is provided by the superintendent on a monthly basis to the board, right? But also making sure that the district that you're in has an aligned instructional system in place that's focused on improving student achievement.
Right. Okay. That alignment is really important, especially once the board set, their goals and the superintendent and his team is out trying to do that. And and you just used the word that comes up often, that have come up often in these conversations I've had, which is the monitoring, which is that monitoring conversation. And so just getting the community attention to see what that is and what that means, how that looks, how they can get their work to actually align with the district goals. What does that look like? Do you see that happening?
Okay, say that again. What group are you?
So referring to community, bringing community into this work, because we know that community plays a very important part of this work when we talk about school boards and the governing school board and them talking to the community. That's the group that I'm actually talking about here.
And you want to know how can they work together to be aligned?
Right.
Number one, there has to be a clear. The districts have to have its ducks in a row and have clear intentionality about their purpose and what they're trying to accomplish, but also have programs, services, and supports that supports the community. Right? Is the district having supports in place really drive? As an example, they're really drive and support the after school organizations that support our kids after school. We used to have a monthly training for our after school partners, out of school, we call out of school time partners. We used to have monthly training to make sure they were up to speed, because ultimately the majority of our kids would leave them, especially our kindergartners and some of our middle school kids would leave and go to after school time, out of school time programs. And they will need help on homework. They will need help on the LMS. They didn't know how to do it. So we make sure we provide a training for the out of school time partners to really be supported. And so if leaders don't look holistically, the board, the superintendent, the central office, even principals as well, look holistically on how we can really work with the community to have a continuation of supports and services for our students, not just in school, but in out of school time programs and at home as well. Those are the things and conversations that we need to have and put in place, so there's a continuous support so our students can thrive as a result.
Okay. All right. One of the questions before we actually end, and because I'm near to the end, is one person asked, are STEM programs still being encouraged, or trades? And are they getting better? Are they both getting the attention they deserve?
I would say, some districts do a good job with it. Some schools do a good job with it, but by and large, I don't think it's done in mass as it should. That requires some additional training for staff, but also requires some additional changes for the curriculum as well and what that looks like, right? Oftentimes schools have magnet programs that are STEM and STEAM-based magnet programs. But for me, I think these opportunities should be in every school for every kid, not just in some special school if you happen to get into that school, being accepted to that magnet program. I think these options should be afforded to all of our students, not just some. And that requires, again, a paradigm shift in how we operate. You have to be intentional about it, right? Real quick, if you go and do the research on Singapore, why folks always talk about Singapore math, they realized years ago they need to do a whole reset of their entire system. That's why they're one of the leaders right now, right? That's why they intentionally changed it, changed the set, right? There are some things that we can do differently to further professionalize our industry, especially supporting teachers, right?
Right.
You don't give them any additional money. Everything comes down to money, right? And I say this, everything comes down to money, because if you want to hire additional teachers to reduce the teacher load, you have to have more money.
Right.
If you want to pay teachers well so they stay, you need more money. And so if we don't, as a nation, there used to be a time in our nation when teachers were revered.
Right.
They were, they would say, you're a teacher. Oh my gosh, you were treated well. That mindset has changed. I'm not saying everyone, but the mindset has changed about teaching.
But let me ask you, the mindset definitely have changed, and teachers are not revered as much as they were back when I was in school, and I'm not going to tell you that. So how long that been? But
Okay.
with this transformation that's happening, and shifting our mission is no longer, we're shifting it from being adult focused to more student outcome focused, right? And so when the bar was actually raised on improving student outcomes, it definitely raised the bar on the adults that's actually servicing them, that's teaching them. And so when you talk about the money to, pay teachers well, and they're also investing money into the professional development for teachers. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great conversation. Listen, I look forward to next time. Hopefully you'll invite me back.
No, you'll be back. You're my partner in crime. And to our audience, look, we're going to do this again. We're going to continue this conversation and actually inviting some of you all to the show, because I would love to hear your perspective as well. We do realize that on this evening that we had a lot of seemed like disconnect on this conversation, but this is an important conversation. And to me, moving the needle forward in Houston, we have to find ways that we can work together, especially nonprofits. How can we align our work with what school districts are doing, not just in HISD, but districts all over Texas, because Texas did change. They made a change and made school boards responsible for the rules, knowing their roles and their responsibility, policies, and budgets. And making sure that they actually come out and talk to the community. And see, my goal is to hope that the community begin to have, conversation around what the school boards are actually looking at. They're looking at this data, they're looking at their goals, and we as a community need to actually be a part of that conversation, especially as they, change them. I'm sorry.
Before we go, community, how do we hold our school board accountable for focusing on student outcomes? Making sure you get trained, have a 2-day training, you understand outcomes focused governance, what that could be for our kids. Then you hold your school board person accountable, because when you vote for someone, you want to know if they are focused on improving student outcomes, if they're going to do the work that needs to be done.
Exactly.
Work is because you've been trained on what outcomes focused school board member should look like. And what.
Right. Because
focus, you don't vote for them.
You say what?
I said, if they're not student outcomes focused, then you don't vote for that board member, because they're not going to do the right work to move student achievement. That's what I mean.
Okay. We need people on the board that are going to do the work to move student achievement. You got to be focused on whatever they have set, the goals to improve student outcomes, because right now that is where we're at. We are, working on improving student outcomes, educating our community about these changes. Like you say, the 2-day workshop, hey, it's worth it. It keeps you on board, and you know what's going on. You know what's going on and what the school actually, what the district is doing, and you'll be able to follow the district and be more comfortable. Many of the people don't like answering surveys, Dr. Hamlet. They don't give input. But, once I just feel comfortable for myself, when I begin to really pay attention and learn this work, I'm comfortable with, sharing my inputs and thoughts and what I'm seeing, in the community. Is it helping our children and stuff like that? So this is something that's definitely, we're going to definitely keep coming and on each week we coming on. Dr. Anthony, if he's free, I'm going to pull him in, and of course others. And like I said, for myself, if you all want to reach out to me, I'm here in Houston at Discovering You. The email address is discoveringyou.info. You can email, that's the website, but please feel free to go to the website. You can also email me from there. And Dr. Hamlet, where's your contact information?
My contact information is easy. It's Dr. as in Dr. Anthony Hamlet at gmail.com altogether. Dr. Anthony Hamlet at gmail.com. That's Hamlet with 1 T, Hamlet.
All right. Well, again, thank you. I really appreciate you bringing this conversation, being open to bringing this conversation to our community, so that we can see how we can better support our children as well as support schools in our community. So I really appreciate your time on this evening.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. I look forward to next time. Okay.
All right, thank you. And audience, thank you to the listeners. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your information. Again, you can always reach out to me if you have any additional questions. You want to get more involved in the work, learn more about the work. Please feel free to reach out to me. My actual website is jmthomas@discoveringyou.info. You can email me and let's do this. We can do this, community. I know we can. Thank you.
Are we backstage?